has it I'm the first person to go through this program, become a CIO, and come back and share. So that was pretty cool. I'm really humbled to be here. And I did just accept this position for the CIO of the Ohio Department of Children and Youth. I'm going to talk about that a little bit more. I got a few things to share with you today, and hopefully you can see this well. I'm going to tell you a little bit about my story and then some of my hackers, but they are not gender specific, so no worries there. So about me, I would tell you that I stumbled into technology, but I definitely think it's purposeful. It's right where I'm supposed to be. I had kind of a rough start to adulthood and didn't really have a career path planned in mind, just kind of trying to do the next best thing. And I worked for a company in Lewis Center, and I was actually in an administrative role, and I got tapped on the shoulder to do different user acceptance testing efforts for different projects. And so I did that. There was no real training. It was just kind of, here, go test out the functionality, be a user, tell us how it goes. And I always tended to find things in that effort, things that weren't really thought about or maybe had poor user experience. And so I kept getting tapped on the shoulder to do this work. And so one day I got offered the opportunity to be a business analyst, and they did not have a business analyst at the time. So this was kind of an interesting thing for me because I didn't actually know what that meant. I literally had to ask the question, what does that even mean? What is that? What will I do? And so what I will tell you is that opportunity was extremely pivotal for me, not just because it was my entry into technology, but because it was with a team of people it was a small IT team, but they actually really invested in me. I mean, they took the time. I was actually the only female there, but it was a great group of guys who took the time to invest in me. One of the gentlemen set me up with the IIBA, the International Institute of Business Analysis, and just so I could learn. And then another one introduced me to Toastmasters, so I could start practicing my communication skills. In that role, because it was such a small IT team, I did requirements, but I also did testing. I learned how to write SQL queries and dig into the data. One day I even recorded messages in Spanish for our after hours when we implemented a new system. So I really got to wear a lot of hats, and that was awesome. And I would say because of that, because I wasn't really kept in a bubble, I learned very quickly. And I dove in head first. Everything I did, I really tried hard to be the best that I could be at it. And they met me with that, and maybe even with more effort than what I put in at times. So that was really my first pivotal moment professionally. And when I got enough experience that I felt like I could be competitive, I was actually encouraged to look out and find another opportunity. And so I joined, it was actually CareWorks as a consultant, but I landed at Nationwide. And so I went there as a business analyst. And within, maybe 6 months or so, I was offered a full-time position. And I did that for about a year. Now, as you know, Nationwide is much bigger. And that means I didn't wear as many hats. It was much more in a bubble. It was really strictly just kind of BA work. And that was actually a hard transition for me because I liked doing all kinds of stuff. And but I did it, and I got involved in a lot of different things. Shortly thereafter, I got the opportunity to be a Scrum Master. So now I got to add to my toolkit of things and learn budgeting and facilitation and indirect leadership. And then about a year and a half after that, I had the opportunity to interview for a manager position that was in a completely different area of the company. So I didn't know the people. It wasn't something that they kind of knew my work. But the director was willing to take a shot on me and give me my first people leadership position. And I'm not sure about many of you, but that's actually a hard thing to get sometimes. Not everybody feels like they want to take that shot because a lot of times they want somebody to come in who has the experience, right? They don't want to have to put the work in always, depending on the situation. So I was very grateful for that. In fact, years later, I've reached out to him many times, just letting him know I still think about the fact that he gave me that first shot, because that meant a lot to me. So that was another pivotal moment. Now I was a direct people leader at Nationwide. And I supported in that area basically applications that supported enterprise operations as a whole. So a kind of diverse portfolio. I got a lot of interaction with different groups at Nationwide. I was there for a little while, and then I accepted another IT manager position. And it was actually an investments, so completely different business function, a lot of learning, new terminology, all of those things. So even though it was Nationwide, it was nothing like what I did in the prior role. And so I did that for a little while, and about a year and a half, I guess, after that, I joined NetJets. And I will tell you, NetJets is probably the coolest business model I've ever seen. The idea that as a customer of NetJets, you can call in and book a flight and get guaranteed, I think, within like 4 hours. Yep, I got some people here keeping me honest. So 4 hours and go anywhere, I mean, that was just amazing to me because they're not scheduled flights. Like, they reposition planes and do all of that stuff. So again, another drastically different business, and so that was a really cool opportunity for me. And there, I was really looking for the ability to obtain a position to lead other leaders. And so I was involved in things to do that indirectly, but I didn't get the opportunity to do it directly. And that's really where I felt like was my next position that I needed to work towards. And so one day I got an invitation to have coffee with the CIO of the Ohio Department of Job and Family Services, and never been in public sector before. That was completely new to me. I was familiar with Job and Family Services, but so we met up and had coffee, and he was telling me about a Office of Innovation that he wanted to stand up. And this was not a leader's position though. It was a very small team. I actually just had architects that would be reporting up to me. So small team at the time, but the idea was blank slate. It was to build an Office of Innovation. And he really had some progressive ideas around that in public sector, and that was really exciting to me. And so for me, there was a point in my career where it was more about, I would say, climbing the ladder and feeling like I just kind of had to keep going regardless of what that was. But over time I learned that it wasn't necessarily just that, but it was also, what am I adding to my toolkit? So I thought about the skills that each position would provide and what I could add to my toolkit. In addition to that, I learned from mentors and things that it's also about not just what you add to your toolkit, but will you have a story to tell at the end of it? And that was actually something that always kind of stuck in my head. What am I gonna be able to take away from this, and what story can I tell? It's not just about what's on my resume, but what am I gonna be able to bring to the table from that? So because of those things, I took that position. Even though it wasn't the leader of leaders I was thinking about, I felt like this was actually something that would go a different direction, but add a significant amount to my toolkit and be a really great story to tell. And I joined JFS on March 9th, 2020. The reason why that's significant to me is because that is when the governor declared a state of emergency for the pandemic. So Office of Innovation went out the window. If you don't know Job and Family Services, it is actually where all the unemployment happens, the child care, all of the relief for food, all of those things. So there was nothing about innovation really happening. It was, we've got hundreds of thousands of people that need unemployment for a system that is so archaic and used to getting 50,000 claims a year. We're broken. I mean, it was just a mess. And so it was an all hands on deck situation. And I will tell you that I would always say that I thrived under pressure. Like by default, and even in app dev, that's kind of the area I grew up in, I say, in IT. There's prod support, there's a lot of that. And in those moments, I know I always kind of thrived under that, meaning I was able to maintain that sense of control of the situation without panic and, kind of keeping everybody moving. But this definitely proved that to be true because it was complete chaos during that time, and not a lot of fans of Ohio Department of Job and Family Services. So within 3 months of being there, I was offered the position of assistant CIO, and that was over all of application development. So there were essentially 3 director levels, so leaders that reported up into me from an application development perspective, and they all had teams. So this was my first leadership opportunity, but on steroids. And so I will say definitely another pivotal moment for me, but I would also say, though COVID brought a lot of forward things professionally, that was a launch pad for me. This opportunity professionally was a launch pad to really show my skills and to leverage them without even a lot of planning, just to do, just to jump in and do. And so that was very cool for me. About a year and a half after that, the CIO for JFS actually got a position as a CIO for the city of Atlanta. And he tapped me on the shoulder, and I joined his team as the chief technology officer. And I was remote, believe it or not, so I did not move to Atlanta, which was very fascinating to people, especially for city in a public sector environment. And so that was actually really cool because that expanded the breadth of my oversight from just application development and data and innovation to infrastructure and operations. So now I was getting a purview and really kind of hands in on the other side of the house from an IT perspective, and it's just not an area that I was heavily engaged in before. And the other cool thing about that was I was serving a lot of different people. So a lot of business units. So it wasn't just like city operations, like what you think of City Hall and the administrative stuff there, but also public safety. So courts, police, fire, the airport, the biggest airport in the US, water services, parks and rec. So it was all across the board and drastically different from anything I had ever done. And so again, just kind of broadening my breadth of understanding for operations, both in the public and the private sector. And then my latest opportunity in November, I took on the position of the CIO for the Ohio Department of Children and Youth. And again, another pivotal moment, as this was my first CIO position. But this was actually a pivotal moment for me personally. So I told you that I had a rough start to adulthood. What I didn't tell you is what that really meant. So I was a young mom, and I actually obtained many of the services that Job and Family Services and now the Ohio Department of Children and Youth provide. And so for me, it was really cool to think about that this kind of came full circle. And the other fun fact for me is that the first IT position as a business analyst that I accepted was actually the position that cost me all those benefits. So accepting that position is actually what took away all of the benefits that I had through state services. So my entry into IT ended the support I had, which was a very scary moment in my life. And my first CIO position is over the agency that now provides those benefits. So it's a very, very cool story for me, and I look forward to seeing how that continues to play out in my life. So I'm gonna jump in a little bit to some of the hackers that I have. And before I dive into some of them, I really wanted to share common ones first that I've learned or heard all throughout really my career. And I'm sure none of these are a surprise to you, to be honest with you. They're all really important. So networking, you were just talking about tech strategy. And I love the meeting two people. So one time I had a mentor that actually challenged me every networking event to get 2 business cards. And it was just a way to purposefully interact with at least 2 new people and to connect. And that's something I did. I mean, I had to actually bring the business cards back to him to prove I was not lying. But so it was a really good opportunity, and I would say hands down, I mean, networking is what has helped me get to where I am. You know, getting in the door as far as the conversation is where the networking comes in. The execution and doing my part is what kept me going. But definitely getting the first conversation is where the networking came in. The other one, mentor, I just mentioned a mentor. You can have a mentor for a lot of different reasons, and I'm sure I'm not telling you anything you don't know, but I did take advantage of that. That is something that I really thought about, whether it be a soft skill and somebody that I really admired that, you know, had that soft skill, or something technical, or even just kind of leadership style, etc. So I would say that is something that I encourage, and it's okay to change, and it's okay if somebody doesn't work out. That's one thing I always kind of felt bad about, but you want to make sure it's a good match on both sides. The next is stay in the know, which again, not surprising, I'm sure, but really just being aware of what's going on around you from a technology perspective, or in the industry. I think that is something that's definitely always helped me. You know, being a CTO for the city of Atlanta and not living there, it is an extremely political environment. And I had to be familiar with what was going on locally. So I get creative. Like I'm, you know, going online, looking at their newspapers and all of that stuff, because it impacted my job and impacted the efforts coming our way. So whatever it is, whether it's, you know, from a technology perspective or just the business that you support, you know, staying in the know, I think is important. And then also not recreating a wheel. So chances are you're not gonna run into something that somebody else hasn't, or 100 people haven't. There's a huge network out there, not just people, but also resources like Infotech and all those other things. So use them. I mean, that's one thing that, you know, a lot of times I would get in the bad habit of feeling like I had to start from scratch. That's just not true, and you know, it doesn't help you actually. So I did want to touch on those just because I think they're so commonly talked about, but they are really important. They're not really the hackers I wanted to share with you today. So when I think about what I wanted to share, I really tried to think about the things that I felt really made a difference for me from a career perspective, in addition to just the things we commonly hear. So the first one I'm going to go into is hang up the cape. What do I mean by that? What got you here won't get you there. So in most cases, I think I can confidently say that high performers are typically the ones that are getting the opportunities, right? The promotional opportunities. You're the ones standing out. I was always a high performer, and a lot of times what that meant was I was carrying the team or carrying the effort. I was called in to do the job and to get it done. And sometimes that was a one-woman show, and sometimes it wasn't. But what I will tell you is, as I've continued up through leadership, that hero mentality does not work well. In fact, you can get the job done, you know. There's been times I have had to do that because maybe the situation, I didn't have the right skill set on the team, or maybe I didn't trust that they were gonna deliver timely. That has happened, but it doesn't actually, ultimately help in the end. It really, I can get the job done, but it actually just enables the situation longer. And so my question for you to think about is, you know, do your actions create an outcome of growth for others? I chose outcome instead of opportunity on purpose. So I think it's really easy to say, am I setting other people up for success? Am I creating the opportunities for them to grow? But when I think about that, and the reason I chose outcome is because I think about the fruit that they bear. If you're setting up opportunities for them to grow, but they're not bearing any fruit, why? And I think really digging into that will take it to the next level. At least it has for me. Because you may be checking the box to set them up and give them this opportunity, but that doesn't mean you're actually helping them grow. They might not have the right skill sets or the tools, or, you know, whatever it is, right? You might have to dig a layer deeper to really do that. But I think investing in other people helps us grow as leaders as well. So that is my first habit for you. My my second hacker is authenticity. And I know this can kind of be a buzzword, I feel sometimes, but I am really all about authenticity. When I was early in my leadership, very, very early, in my first Scrum Master manager position, I was always under the impression that I had a professional hat and a personal hat. And they were two different things. I was two different people. When I walked into work, I was somebody else. And I had different skill sets, and I had to approach things different ways, etc. And yeah, there's things that you're gonna use professionally or facilitate in a way professionally that you wouldn't personally. Right, I mean, that is true. But what I will tell you is, I did not have the right perspective of that. And the more I learned to integrate my worlds, and to be me, to show up as me at my core, the more effective I was. And quite frankly, I think the more people respected me as a human being. I can tell you because I had this idea of what I had to do as a leader, or to get to the next level, I burned a bridge along the way. Not realizing, I didn't even intentionally, I thought I was checking all the boxes I was supposed to do with that hat. And I burned a bridge, and I went back, honestly, years later when I realized that, and I apologized to the person. I don't know if they forgive me, but the point is that I learned my lesson, and that really stuck with me. And so for me, and I actually did this here in this class. I don't know if you guys have done this yet, but spent time on my vision statement and my values, and I've gone back and looked at those. And I don't know how you felt, but in that moment, that felt kind of weird to me, a little odd. But what I will tell you is that actually helped keep me very grounded thereafter, because I really did put time to reflect what I really did care about morally, who I wanted to be as a person, and that was priceless for me. And so I am going to take some time to share with you my vision statement, because I'm not lying, and my values. So for me, my vision statement is: I will strive to live a healthy life of content, integrity, and compassion. I will provide a safe haven for those who need it, and let my actions speak from my heart and the heart of others. I will aim high while lifting others up along the way, staying true to my faith and devoted to becoming a better person daily. So for me, that actually really encompasses all areas of my life and how I show up, and gut check for when I'm not showing up that way. And then my values, I have them here, and then I also kind of translated what they mean to me. So integrity, for me, that's authenticity, not taking the easy way out, doing the right thing, and staying true to my faith. Growth, being self-aware, becoming a better version of myself daily, and that's in all aspects. Empathy, meeting people where they are, pausing in the moment, seeking to understand. And then hard work, taking action, showing up with my whole heart, and giving it my best. So these are things I can tell you that once I really started to think about my values and my vision and who I was as a person, and integrating that across both professionally and personally, I showed up more as a whole person every day. And I related to people better, and they saw the sincerity in my efforts. It wasn't a question of like, what's your motive, Brady? They could see it, they could feel it, and I think that has made a huge difference in my ability to lead, to influence others, to empower others, etc. The next one is curiosity. So part of this, I think, is kind of who I am. I mean, I told you I kind of grew up in IT as a BA, and so curiosity was kind of part of my thing. But I will tell you that has been extremely beneficial to me throughout my career. And I kind of like to say I'm reading between the lines. So I'm looking for things that aren't being asked, or I'm looking for things that aren't being thought about. You might have heard, if you say orange, you're talking about the fruit or the color. There's a lot of assumptions being made in conversations, and it's not just doing analysis and getting requirements, but I mean in everyday conversations. And so oftentimes I find myself looking for those and spotting the miscommunication, spotting the gap. I'm typically the one that's saying, hey, hold up, let's make sure we're on the same page. When you say this, is this what you mean? Or this is what I understand. And so that's helped me in a lot of different ways. And I will tell you, just in transparency, I've gotten really frustrated sometimes with my team because folks are going down the path and there were a whole lot of assumptions made just because they didn't take the time to kind of dig in. You know, they took things at face value, you know what I mean, and not taking the time to dig in. And so I have found that curiosity is a little bit difficult to teach people because their default is just to keep it moving. You know, we gotta go. And so this is actually something that I really do think is important. I think it makes a difference in the outcome significantly, but I do think it's extremely difficult to get people to do if it's not in their nature. The next one, I'm getting a little deep here, but know yourself. So this really is about digging in, and I talked about it with authenticity, but I'm gonna take it a step further. It really is about self-awareness, reflection, and growth. And I'm saying that holistically. You know, I will tell you that this is not something I did holistically my entire adulthood, definitely not childhood, but even as an adult. It really wasn't until probably the last several years, maybe 5, that I took it to a different level, personally. And again, kind of going back to that authenticity piece, but even more so, it helps you be a better version of you. And that's what I care about. So for me, being a better version of me, that's part of my vision. So that's who I want to be and who I want to show up every day. So I definitely think that's important. And this is actually from a book, but there's a lot of resources out there as far as kind of your North Star, what's your North Star, but it referenced some of the things I talked about, so I just wanted to share with you. It is called True North. I will be honest with you, there are some things in that book I didn't agree with and things that I did, but that's kind of how things go. You just kind of take the pieces. But the good thing is that when something is presented to you that you're not quite aligned to, it challenges your thinking, and that's always a helpful thing to consider. So, you know, it just has in here kind of that compass and touched on things I talked about, like the integration, self-awareness, values and principles, and some of these I'm actually going to get to. Next one is having mental agility. And so I would say this simply is the ability to pivot, but think clearly through those pivots. And so I do have kind of a brief definition here as far as your ability to do so. These are not Brittany's words. I did look up kind of the benefit of that, so you didn't think I was too crazy. But you know, it is proven that it helps you with critical reasoning, and keeps your mind open to different options, accelerates your learning, enables heightened performance, and helps you break through habitual thought patterns. So it really challenges you. The more you're able to shift and think clearly through that, it really challenges your thought patterns. And over time, I mean, I'm sure you've heard this before, right? When you kind of create a habit, you have to repeat that for new pathways and all of that stuff to be established, right? Okay, well, when you're in a certain way of thinking, you're gonna go down that same path every time. But the more you practice, you know, kind of shifting in that, the more you're able to manage through situations. The E in Hackers is embrace the business. I touched a little bit on this earlier. You know, I really think that part of the reason why I was able to get to where I am, and I would say quickly. I mean, my path there has been pretty quick in comparison to many others. And I say that humbly. I think a lot of that is actually my diverse background from an industry perspective. I did not stay in the same industry very long. I you know, went across multiple industries, public and private sector, and that wasn't my plan to begin with, just to be clear. Nobody told me that. Nobody told me to go do that. But you know, I I learned that all of those areas, they dealt with similar problems. Everybody has, tech debt, cloud migration, application rationalization, single points of failure, the list goes on. All of those things exist. But the nuances across all those different industries, the nuances across public and private sector, that's what helped with that mental agility. Because I couldn't think the same way in every scenario. It wasn't the same business rules. I had to dive in, understand the business, understand what they cared about, understand the rules of the road, their norms, right? And then really try to step back after I dove in deep to learn, and I always tried to learn very quickly what mattered to my stakeholders, what the day-to-day looked like, etc. That I tried to do quickly. But then I took a step back to think about, okay, think about holistically the things that I've learned and how pieces and parts of other solutions or scenarios would help me solve the problem at hand or help us get to the next level. And I think that was extremely important. So even if you don't have that diversity in background, still diving in to embrace the business and what they care about, I think is extremely important and will set you apart from others. Because I'm sure all of you have heard some type of feedback about IT versus business and how IT doesn't understand, or all you say is no. So, I think there's a lot more we can do there to assist in that, but really seeking to understand and be a part of it, I think is a big part of that success. The next one I want to talk about is resilience. So this is really having, I'm going to say it differently, but the ability to bounce back. And I do think it's really important because we have failures in technology. As you go through your leadership, at least for me, I had moments of failure where I didn't do the right thing, not intentionally, but I made a mistake. I didn't handle a situation the right way. I maybe didn't respond. I made a bad call. So the ability to bounce back. And when I was actually, after I had my kind of agenda laid out, I went through some of my resources from when I went through this program. And this quote actually came from Innovative IT, Bangalore IT Leadership Program. And it was our biggest opportunity are during disorientation. And the idea is that in the moment of when you feel like you've been knocked off, your foundation, whatever it is, that's actually where the opportunity can occur, the biggest opportunity occur, because that's where growth can occur. And I think it's really true. So I just wanted to share that with you. So just to kind of reflect quickly, mental agility and resilience can be thought of as the same thing at times, but it's really, for me, mental agility is the ability to pivot, and resilience is the bounce back. So that's really kind of how I identify those differently and why I think they're both important. And the last one I have, my S, is to surround yourself with people that will hold you accountable and help you grow. So this is really kind of all aspects. We like typically when people pat us on the back and we get the accolades. We like having our team around us to cheer us on. But for me, I think as a leader, and even just as being human, because I care so much about being a better version of myself, because I care so much about all of the other things I talked about with you today, having people who will hold me accountable and will really help me get to the next level has been really important to me, and more important as I really dug into some of these things. Those could be mentors. That could be a coworker that you have a good relationship with and can just be like, hey, that actually wasn't really cool. You probably shouldn't. Don't do that. Whatever it is, it doesn't have to be a big thing. My point is that when you have people who are comfortable enough with you, you've created that environment that they are comfortable enough with you to help you grow and give you that feedback, I think is imperative. And I noticed that I may have had people personally that would do that on a personal level, because they see me, right, in that personal level, but not always professionally. For me, it was harder to find people professionally to do that. And so I think when I did have some people that saw me in the professional, I didn't even do it intentionally. There's certain scenarios where I created, relationships evolved, and I invested a little bit more, and maybe they came to the table, I came to the table, and so there's a sense of vulnerability there, and honesty and transparency. But that's actually been extremely valuable to me, even without intention on doing so. When I think about that, there are people who have seen me in settings, and later, we talk through things, what, this would really help you, because in the past, you've done blah, 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 blah to handle the situation, but that might not have been as fruitful, and it was like, oh yeah, like you saw that, you saw me. Not that I did something bad, but the outcome, right, wasn't as fruitful. And so they were able to identify that and help me see that. So that's what I mean. I'm not always talking about something deep, it doesn't always have to be, your most vulnerable moments, but just even how you facilitate or manage a project. Or again, I was talking about the outcomes that you're creating, even things like that. People who see you in that element that you can create an open conversation with can be very beneficial. So just to kind of go back through, so there really was an acronym here for hackers. Just hang up the cape, authenticity, curiosity, know yourself, have mental agility, embrace the business, resilience, and surround yourself with people that will hold you accountable and help you grow. And that is what I have to share with you today, ladies and gentlemen. I will open it up for questions.
When you started in, well, first of all, thank you for sharing. I really appreciate you sharing your story. I was curious when you were talking, what was the moment where you thought, that's when I want to be a CIO? Because you talked about, you started off in IT and, as a business analyst, and you kind of, took quite a journey. Was there ever a moment where you thought, that's the star that I want? Or is it more that the path just kind of took you there and now you're standing where you're today?
Thank you for the question. That's a great question, because the truth is, I did not pick that. And what I mean by that, I had people tell me early on, here's the path. Like, here's where you should go. And honestly, I think there are people who saw leadership maybe qualities in me, and so they were like, hey, but and it was like they had this list of, okay, here's the path, and here's what you should do to get to a CIO. And at that time, I didn't really actually have an opinion on being a CIO. I was like, okay. But that did influence how when I mentioned earlier about kind of my idea of kind of climbing the ladder and checking those boxes, that influenced that a little bit, to be honest with you, and not necessarily in a good way. Not that they gave the wrong messaging, but my interpretation of that messaging and that path. But over time, when I really got into leadership, but I mean really dug in and valued people leadership, and I could see my strengths, and I really thought about who I wanted to be and what I wanted to be, then that shifted. It became more of a desire. And to be honest with you, for me, CIO isn't my end game. I have actually, I think it's a path, it's a step that's gonna help me. And I plan to do this for a while, but I actually wanna start a nonprofit one day, and I've wanted to for a long time, and I know what I wanna do it for, and all of those things. And so, I think this is the path that's helping me build a lot of skills and learn a lot of things. But over time, I didn't always want to start a nonprofit. I didn't always know how I was going to get there or whatever. I didn't have that. I didn't have a plan really laid out. It's just kind of evolved. But I can see how all of those pieces coming together really have added a lot of value and will help me continue to grow in my career.
Sure?
Yeah.
Hi, Brittany. You mentioned hang up the cape. Could you expand on that? Because I find myself being the one that gets things done more often than not. So how do you do that? How do you pull back or involve others, especially when you may have a skill set that they don't.
Yeah, I will tell you that's been very difficult for me. Because, especially when you're on a timer. I mean, when there's like a timeline, it's like, okay.
There's always a time.
Right, and you're right, and it's always yesterday.
Yeah.
So, there's been times I have not done that well, just in transparency, but I know that, and my goal is to do it well. So I think it's putting thought, for me, it was putting thought into how I could set other people's up so I didn't have to wear the cape. So it's looking ahead. So maybe in this moment you have to wear this cape because you just don't have the time. There's been times I had something due by end of day, and I knew it was too big of a risk for me to give it, you know what I mean, to Sally, whoever, right? So I knew that, but so I had to do it. I just had to get the job done.
Yeah.
But I had to think about what can I do so that I'm not in this position again in the future. And I think being proactive in that and purposely trying to, whether it's setting people up with how to obtain certain resources, or if it's a skill set, whatever it is that gap exists. For me, it was kind of a lot of different things depending on the scenario. So I had to be intentional about working with those individuals so that I could pass it off to them. And then I also had to think about how I directed them, because I'm sure you guys know everybody's different, and they come to the table with different qualities, different strengths and weaknesses, and you can't always say the same direction to all of them and get the same outcome. I mean, that's been my experience. So learning the people and what I needed to say or do to get the best outcome, that varies sometimes. And so that took some iteration, there's been times that I've had to do something in like a group setting, and maybe I had 4 different leaders in that group setting that I was giving this direction to. 2 people could have walked away with one understanding, the other a different, even though I might have a bulleted list on paper, over communicating, all of those things, and it didn't matter. So I learned kind of where those gaps were, and then what I needed to do. Like maybe somebody, okay, now I need to have a follow-up conversation. So it's not a quick and easy solution. It takes time, but I think that you really have to sit back and think about your team and the qualities of each of those members of your team, where you need them to perform or outcomes, and then invest time in that, so that way you can even then be purposeful about giving them certain opportunities when there isn't a pressure, or maybe there's a longer deadline. You can be more mindful of that because you're looking for it.
Yeah.
So,
Okay, thank you.
you're welcome.
Yeah, first of all, I just want to say congratulations on everything you've accomplished up to this point. I'm sure it wasn't easy, and given every opportunity, some people wouldn't be able to accomplish what you have. So, words for them. My question though is, being a woman in technology, how could we help and promote and encourage other women in leadership to aspire to where you are?
Thank you for that question. I think that's also not a straight line answer, but I think there's a couple of different things, because part of it I think depends on the individual and the scenario. I've been in scenarios where I was the only woman at the table many times, and there's been scenarios where it was very obvious I was the only woman at the table, and to be quite frank with you, I was dismissed. So for me, I go logical. I don't go emotional. I go logical and meet logic of logic in that scenario. But not everybody does. Everybody kind of handles those scenarios differently. And I think if you recognize those moments where maybe somebody's feeling like they're at a disadvantage, that they don't have a fair seat at the table, being purposeful about giving them a voice, I think is really important. And it doesn't always have to be obvious, but just showing value to those ideas. There are scenarios early on, and I'm sharing it early on because that's the impression. When you think just, as you're entering into something, this kind of first impressions, and then they kind of build who you are over time, right? As a kid, like this is what you think, and then this is kind of how you progress, and you have this idea in your mind. The same is true, I think, in your career. When you experience something for the first time and it's a bad impression, you kind of continue thinking that this is how it goes. So early on, I think in my career, those were really influential moments. And there were people who helped me see things a little bit differently. There were also groups, and I don't know that this would be true in every scenario, but there were groups, like when I was in Nationwide, I co-chaired a Women in Tech group, and there were men who supported that group. I mean, they were part of the support. So there's other ways too, if the opportunity is there to support in a different way, just to kind of say, hey, how can I show up and support you at this table? But I think even just making sure that when you see or feel like maybe there's a hesitation there, could be lack of confidence, etc. Just trying to recognize that and help others have a voice.
You talked about wanting to start a nonprofit. How does your experiences lead you to wanting that, and what type of nonprofit?
So some of my experiences are a little bit more personal, but I would say when I think about who I am as a person and what I care about, my vision statement is about being a safe haven and providing support for others. So when I think about what fills my cup, what gives me joy, the things that drive me, that's really, kind of one of the things. The nonprofit is actually to help trafficked women and girls. So I have a lot of ideas around that and what I want to do with that. But that's the dead area. It's been something I've been passionate about for a long time. From a career perspective, you'd be like, okay, Brittany, what does technology have to do with that? But there's a lot. I mean, I'm learning business. I'm learning, actually my daughter started a company, and I jumped in and helped create her website. I hadn't created a website before. I mean, all of those things you just kind of learn, but technology kind of gave me the in some ways to do that. But there are things that translate elsewhere in life, and that's really, I think, how it comes together.
I am so happy for your success, Brittany.
Thank you.
It just fills me with joy to have you here speaking today.
Thanks.
And I love the intentionality of your presentation. And because it was so intentional, I'm positive every word in there means something to you. There was a reason it was there. And there was one that I paused on. When you were talking about resilience, you had resist was the first thing. And resist, adapt, and then rebound, right, to change. And I'm just really curious about the resist part of that as part of resilience. What does that mean to you?
I think for me, that is about not letting, we all have our thing as far as, I'll call it a glass ceiling, right? Or something that maybe kind of stops you and maybe causes you to think less of your ability or less of, your capabilities in a moment. And so for me, it's not letting that get in the way. I might have a moment where I'm like, I can't do this. I don't stay in that moment long. I'm very much a bounce back person.
So acknowledging that reaction, is that what I'm hearing? Acknowledge and then move on.
Yeah, it's just kind of like, you have to feel it. I don't think it's healthy to just pretend like you're not feeling something. I think you have to feel it. You have to live in that for a moment and understand it, but you don't have to stay there. That's the choice. The choice is whether you stay there. And for me, I choose not to stay there, but just to keep pushing.
One of your themes was jumping in, and we had such a fun intersection. We didn't intersect much. Do you remember?
Yeah.
Are you okay if I tell that
Sure.
story?
Yeah.
All right, so in terms of jumping in, Brittany and I were at one of her employers at the same time, and there was a large Diwali celebration being planned. And this was one of my first experiences with inclusion, really, intentional inclusion, because people planning the Diwali celebration reached out to the two people. They were like, okay, we want to bring people in. They reached out to Brittany and they reached out to me and to be a part of this choreographed dance. And, neither of us, I think, knew the song or knew the moves or anything.
And I can't dance.
And my role was also, I was supposed to get the CEO and the EVP of the organization to join in. And we did, and we both jumped in, and although this was we really didn't intersect much at that
No,
employer.
no,
This
you're right,
pretty
you're
much
right.
was the sum of
Yeah.
our intersection.
Yeah.
But we both jumped in and showed up, and we got the CEO and the EVP to come into the dance, and it was just this wonderful, silly, but joyful
It was,
and
yeah.
inclusive celebration that we got to be a part of.
Yeah,
That was
cool. Yeah, thank you for sharing.
I have another question.
Yeah, go for it.
So with your new position at, Children and Youth, what's an initiative that you're really excited about?
So, right now I'm not doing tons of fun stuff, but it's because.
Or challenged?
No, I'll share what I'm excited about, but, it's a little bit more on the horizon. So, this is kind of like a merger, so it's kind of this mix between merger and startup, and what I mean by that is they took, 6 different state departments and they're pooling the programs and therefore the applications and technologies from those together. So I have to figure out how to pull it all together and under one umbrella and how to have the team to support it and all of that. So it's a lot of very, kind of foundational but challenging things at the moment. So, I kind of got through that. But the thing I'm excited about is the ability to impact outcomes. So there is so much data, and there are many disparate systems, there are many silos, and I think there's so much that we can do to really kind of bring that together and think about the whole experience of a person that's going through the system, all of the interactions, and leveraging that data. I mean, ideally, you should be able to actually use trends of that data to predict when somebody's gonna land in the system, what services they're gonna need, how long they're gonna be in the system, and if you can do that, then you can implement programs to help prevent that. And I think, I know we can get there. I've got a lot of work to do for us to get there. But I think the impact of that is tremendous. And that is really what is so exciting to me about this opportunity, is that there's real impact that can happen. And I might not see it, to be honest with you, in my time there, because that type of impact takes time. But I have no doubt that it's definitely a possibility and something that can be felt by people, and that excites me.
So thank you first for sharing with such authenticity your personal story, because it is both inspirational and hard. How did you navigate those dark days and tough moments that you kept going, you raised your kids, you took the next hard step and you got to run into the, just burrow into the covers and not get out of bed?
Yeah, thanks, Maureen. I don't think, well, I'm trying to think back, some of this happened pretty early in my 20s. So, I didn't always handle it the same way. Now I would tell you that, God grit in the gym is my solution to life. But I think part of this is just the deep desire to want more, and I don't mean like a superficial more. I mean just trying to do better, to have more for my kids, to do better for my family. I will tell you that I know wholeheartedly my path and my story could have ended very differently.
Well,
My
that's funny.
story could have been a statistic, and a different statistic. It is extremely difficult for women to get out of that support because there's no stepping stones. It's just kind of like it's there or it's not. You know what I mean? And there were actually many times before I took on that position that I turned down raises, like performance increases, because it would hurt me. I couldn't risk it. Like it would have hurt me too badly, and it just didn't make up the difference for, for what I would lose. So there was a glass ceiling for me for a long time, and it kind of got to the point where I knew I could do more. I mean, I believed in myself that I could do more. It was just a matter of how and taking the risk. And faith has always been a big part of me, and I know that's not, everybody's thing, but that's been huge for me. And so even growing up. So it was just something in me. There was just kind of something in me that was like, no, Britt, you gotta just keep pushing, take the risk. And I just had to make the call, one day. And I will say that each time I've had to make the call, I just had to keep pushing. I think it builds confidence over time in your own ability to, handle the next situation, and whatever it is, because you've been through something already. So I think it's just like with everything else, continually to push through it, builds that resiliency, builds all of those characteristics. I think that help.
Do you have a network of women or a mentor or other people that helped you? Because you said there was no clear path.
At different points, yes. So I've had different women or different people encouraging me. They weren't all women though. I mean, I definitely had men that I had worked with or definitely looked up to. The people I think that helped me the most were the people that really knew what I had been through, which were very few. Very few people. It's just not really something you go out and kind of share with everybody. But very few people really understood what was going on behind the scenes. And it was those people that knew me and kind of saw, I guess, or they felt like what I was capable of more, that really encouraged me and pushed me. So outside of that though, there were definitely other groups of people that helped me, but in different ways. It might be more of like a skill set or leadership or that type of thing. But I think it was kind of that more, the more personal group that really knew my story, that kind of helped push me along.
Thank you for being a role model, because I think there are a lot of women who need to hear the story. And men too, because there are also single fathers.
True.
And give inspiration.
Thank you. It was a pleasure being here. I appreciate all of you.
Thank you very much.